Louie Verrecchio and Mario Derksen of Novus Ordo Watch, Louie of aka Catholic.com. Really a pleasure to have them join us today. We had a little bit of a strange issue with Restream that we couldn't get the premiere set up correctly. So people are probably over on the other stream at the moment. Hopefully they will catch us as we are going here. It's always got to be something, guys. This one's on me or my dad. He set up the premiere. I think the issue is he's not here to host it. So that's my bad, everybody. But thank you for joining us. We will have His Excellency Bishop Pierre Roy join us in about 20 minutes. Former SSPX priest, now a quote-unquote state of a contest bishop. He's a true bishop. I just quote-unquote the state of a contest part. He's a Catholic bishop. And today we're talking about the big news of the SSPX deciding to consecrate new bishops, whether or not they have the approval of Leo XIV in Rome. And well, that's why these guys are here today to discuss it. And I don't know, maybe Mario, if you want to start with it, and I'm going to try to go over to YouTube, make sure this other stream is turned off as we're live here. Do you want to just kind of describe where you saw this and what exactly is happening here?
Yeah, if you could just give me 1 second, please. I think we're going to need to let the people in the chat know what is happening. That's and I should post a quick message here on Twitter letting them know that the link has changed.
Yeah, my apologies, everybody.
I'm sorry, but
no, you're good. Well, Louie, while we both try to figure this out, do you want to give us a brief description of what's going on?
Sure. Well, I first found out about this. I got a text message early in the morning from Father Marquez Campo from Spain, my friend, who let me know that this communique came out. He sent a link, but I don't know if other people noticed you couldn't get on to the SSPX.news website for the longest time yesterday. So I couldn't read the communique. I just realized that they made this announcement. And my initial reaction to that was to say back to Father, this looks to me like the beginning of a negotiation. That was my initial impression. And the things that have happened since just confirm that. In his sermon yesterday, Father Pagliarani said, this is why we think that next July 1st could be a good date, an ideal date. In other words, it's not carved in stone. And he quickly followed that up with, I would like one day to be able to meet the Pope before July 1st. And as for me personally, I would just hope that before July 1st, we have a Pope. But at any rate, you know what he's saying here. And then yesterday, Edward Penton of National Catholic Register reported that the Vatican had issued a statement saying this, quote, contacts between the Society of St. Pius X and the Holy See are ongoing with the aim of avoiding ruptures or unilateral approaches to the issues that have arisen, end quote. And so what that statement tells me is that indeed the SSPX, if this was their goal, what they ended up doing is forcing the issue. They pushed things forward and now negotiations are beginning. And so we're going to see where this path leads between now and July 1st. But one of the things that jumps out at me from this statement from the Unholy See about this is that if the society should proceed to consecrations, apart from Leo's approval, it's going to be viewed and treated as a rupture. In other words, we can fully expect excommunications to be issued. And if and when that happens, the question is going to be asked once again, excommunications from what? From what? And I welcome that challenge because the society's primary error is one of ecclesiology. They've redefined what the church is. They've redefined what the Pope is. And hopefully, between now and 6 months from now, we'll see them forced to face this thing head on and maybe come to some clarity.
Mario, thoughts? Are you with us? Perhaps.
I apologize.
You're good. You're good. No worries.
Yes.
I got us off to a bad start here today, even though it's the internet, for once, the internet is working. And of course I mess up the link. Sorry, guys.
Well, it's, nothing like a live stream that nobody can access.
Details. Yeah.
Let me see. I guess I'm going to have to put it on Facebook as well. Yes. So this is going to be a very, very interesting period of time now. I was under the impression that the date of July 1st is kind of set in stone, that's been decided. And I thought to myself, why is it that they're announcing this 5 months ahead of time? That's a pretty long time. Why not 2 or 3 months? I think in 1988, I forget exactly when they started announcing, but I don't think it was as long as 5 months ahead of time. And so I thought, I wonder if they're hoping that, in these 5 months, they're going to have some time to negotiate. And so they've kind of maneuvered Leo XIV into having to react in some fashion. And I don't know him, obviously, but I'm guessing that he's probably not going to be too thrilled with this sort of gun to your head kind of scenario, where they've more or less forced him into a reaction. So I suspect he's not going to be all that amenable to, discussions, negotiations. How can we prevent, the worst? When it is already clear, and especially from the past, that no matter what happens, they're going to consecrate their bishops with or without approval. So I don't know. I'm going to be really, really interested to see what does happen. Yeah, I think this is going to force a lot of people in the recognize and resist world to take sides, or at least to look at the issues and make up their minds, or at least have an understand, like just come to some sort of a position for themselves. Like, is this something I am in agreement with, or is it not? And then the whole question is going to come up again. Well, does that mean people can assist at SSPX masses? And I'm talking from within the recognize and resist world. Or is because the bishops are excommunicated, therefore the masses are now off limits? And all of this is going to be debated up and down. And unlike in 1988, this time we're going to have a lot of people weighing in on it that maybe shouldn't be. There's going to be a lot of this, obviously, on social media, and we're already seeing the beginnings of people throwing out stuff that is just.
I saw you having some nice disagreements with Mr. Kennedy Hall earlier today, which are pretty interesting. And I want you to maybe talk real briefly, Mario, about the excommunications that I think you mentioned earlier, that they come automatically. But first, everyone who's watching, please share this if you can, especially since we got the link wrong up here. That was totally our fault. We had my dad start the stream, and that was a bad idea. So now we know, don't do that. And so please go share it so that we can make sure we get as many people to view it as possible. His Excellency Bishop Pierre Roy will be joining us here in about 15 minutes to give his thoughts on the matter, which of course I think we're all excited for. Of course, him coming from the SSPX will have a very interesting perspective. Mario, what exactly happens? Oh, and I want to say also real quickly, we did plan on having Sean of WM Review. Unfortunately, he had to back out here in the last few hours. He's a busy guy, got a bunch of little kids. And Stephen Cox might be joining us as well. We'll see here as we go. All right, Mario, what is it with the excommunications here? Potential ones.
Well, so supposing the Vatican II popes to be valid, then the law that's on the books, on the official Novus Ordo canon law, is that anyone who consecrates a bishop or several bishops without the required papal mandate incurs automatic excommunication. Okay, and that means the excommunication is incurred simply by doing the deed. Okay, by consecrating. There has to be no declaration. No ecclesiastical judge has to notify you. It just happens by you doing it. Okay, and the excommunication is incurred by the consecrating bishop or bishops, if it's more than one, and by the bishop being or bishops being consecrated by nobody else, not the altar servers, not the priests who are there, not other bishops that may be in attendance that are not participating, like they're not actually conferring the sacrament. So it's only those bishops. And that is exactly what happened in 1988. The consecrations were done on June 30th, and on July 1st, the Vatican issued the dicastery, or well, at the time it was called the Congregation for Bishops. Cardinal Gantin, I think at the time, just issued a quick decree noting that the excommunications had been incurred. This was not necessary for them to have incurred the excommunications, like I just said, but it was done to just let the world know, hey, here's what just happened, and these people are now excommunicated. And yeah, that's the law that's on the books. Of course, the SSPX, didn't think that they were excommunicated. There's probably very few excommunicated people who would agree that their excommunication is valid. So it's kind of meaningless because the defendant doesn't get to judge his own case. Okay. So
well, it all kind of strikes me. I always think of the bad dad example that the SSPX seems to always give, that the R&R people, oh, he's just, he's like a bad dad, a bad pope. And it just kind of strikes me this time around. It's kind of like, so they're going like to their dad and like, hey dad, yeah, we're going to do this, if you kind of like it or not, but we're going to do it. So can we do it? It's just kind of, it's like, wait, so do they need his permission? It is such
Would
a
you
bizarre
please permit
issue.
us to do what we're going to do anyway?
Yeah, exactly.
I mean,
exactly. It just shows you, points out the kind of the silliness of the recognized resist as itself. Kind of like what Louie is saying. It just shows their position is really flawed. I mean, and Louie,
yes.
do you think could this become a nothing burger, or do you think just something is going to happen and it's going to have a big comeuppance either way?
This is going to be a Big Mac. I think there's no chance that this becomes a nothing burger.
Not to say a Whopper. Yeah.
Yeah, a Whopper, although I avoid Whop. I don't know why, but I don't like that phrase so much. But no, kidding. But like one comment here, I'm not real keen on this idea of, there's this layer of bureaucracy between the supposed Holy Father and those bishops around the world who try to reach him with communications. Okay, so Father Pagliarani indicated that he's been making numerous attempts to try to gain an audience with Leo. And Leo's calendar had room for James Martin, but they couldn't make room for Father Pagliarani, and he got frustrated. And it was after a lot of frustration that he made this public announcement of the intent to consecrate. So maybe there is a slight possibility that those attempts to get to the quote unquote Pope never quite reached Leo. So maybe there's a chance that while Father Pagliarani is kind of forcing the issue now and making this the beginning of a negotiation, even if Leo's coming in reluctantly, it's happening. But maybe he's not going to be, so angry that they went around him. So there's most certainly in the Curia a body of bishops, and you look at Cardinal Roach as one of them, that would be keen on keeping any communication from the society to reach Leo's desk. So who knows? That's kind of water under the bridge now, but no, it's not going to turn into a nothing burger by any means. It can't at this point. The genie's out of the bottle. There's no putting it back in.
And so that being the case, what do you think then, assuming then they don't get permission, they do get excommunicated? Is that something, is it going to bring people together? Like, what does this mean? I suppose, I guess I'll let you have a go at it, and then Mario can take it from you. I mean, what is the repercussions from something like this?
Well, I think it's nothing but good can come of this, in my opinion. I mean, the excommunication happens, like Mario said, it's an automatic thing. But just as in 88, you can expect, if that happens, that the unholy see will issue a declaration of some sort. And why would they do that? Well, because excommunication is supposed to be medicinal. It's supposed to be an invitation to the excommunicated person to renounce the errors that put them in that position and come back into the fold, so to speak. But for the benefit of the faithful, the unholy see has an obligation to issue some sort of declaration, so everybody knows these men were excommunicated and can behave accordingly. So that's going to happen, but it forces the society to face head on the question of excommunicated from what? From 1988 to present, they really haven't been able to answer that question, or have been forced to. Now they're going to be forced to answer the question. What were you excommunicated from? A fake church, a counterfeit that leads souls directly to hell. That's who you got excommunicated from. And I would say to you, look, I'm not reading anybody's heart here, but I think the SSPX's position overall is fundamentally dishonest. They know that excommunication means nothing. And why does it mean nothing? Because that's not the Pope and that's not the church. They can't admit that, because if they do, then the franchise will suffer. And I think that's part of the motivating factor here. I could be wrong. The Lord will judge, with absolute certainty. But that, by my observation, it's impossible for me to believe that they honestly think that that's the Holy Roman Catholic Church in Rome today.
Mario, do you agree? Do you think this is something that is gonna bring them a step closer to sedevacantism? I suppose. I mean, if you have to admit, of course, that is not the bride of Christ, that it's a clown show, almost literally, then that's obviously a big deal. I mean, what do you think? Are you optimistic?
I no. I think that certain individuals, individual souls will notice, will notice that this doesn't make sense really, and maybe look at things again and hopefully have a conversion. Overall, I don't think there'll be any change in the society. And part of that, I think, is also because just as the SSPX now has to face that question, excommunicated from what? So also the Vatican has to face the question, how much sense does it make to talk about excommunication and schism when at the same time you're teaching that God wills a diversity of religions? And you're ecumenizing with every heretic under the sun, and you got now a female archlaywoman of Canterbury in the Anglican sect, and you're sending greetings to Hindus for their Feast of False Light, the Diwali, for example, right? It just doesn't make any sense. In fact, in the whole, I don't quite understand yet how what sense the notion of schism makes in an ecclesiology that recognizes a certain imperfect communion between all the baptized. Like, how does that even fit in there? So I just see double standards everywhere, and the only way out is to recognize that the Vatican II popes are not true popes. I know that, brings up all kinds of other issues, but you can't make sense of it any other way. And that has nothing to do with usurping judgment or authoritative judgment or anything. It's simply a matter of drawing a conclusion that is logically necessary. Like, it's impossible to be otherwise.
Well, and I think it's really important for people to go to the right places now too, because as Mario mentioned, you see a lot of stuff on Twitter right now that's kind of like, wait, what? I mean, I've seen it even in the last few weeks. The papal minimalists. I saw a show with Abate, the other night, just saying, do you actually even have to be Catholic to be a pope? And it's kind of like, okay, so what do people actually believe on these matters? And it's a pretty serious issue. So I recommend everyone to go over to novusordowatch.org and to akacatholic.com. These guys are going to help you along the way. They have plenty of material since decades now, guys, both of you making material. And I highly recommend the series I did with Louie on Vatican II, because again, that will really make it clear it cannot be the true Catholic Church, which we are talking about now. We will have His Excellency Bishop Pierre Roy here joining us shortly. I hope. He is a bishop and busy, so you never know with the clergy. Sometimes they literally get called to someone's bedside. So God willing, he will be joining us here soon. That is the plan. But it's, as always, a joy to be joined by Louie and by Mario. So Mario, maybe I'll ask you this: is there anything? What are you excited to watch for from now in the meantime, from now until July 1st? Like, are we looking for something? Are you watching the headlines?
Well,
are you seeing what Rome's going to do?
I'm always watching, right? Novus Ordo watch. But one of the things I'm really looking forward to is hearing about the names of those to be consecrated.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and I don't know if if the SSPX has even made that decision yet, if Father Pagliarani has made that decision yet, or however the decision is made. I think there's a very good chance that Father Pagliarani himself will be one of those consecrated as the Superior General, although I'm aware that Archbishop Lefebvre did not really want a bishop to be the Superior General. At least that's my understanding. I don't have that chapter and verse anywhere, but that's what I heard when I was when I attended SSPX masses. That was about 23 years ago now. And the reason was that he didn't want to give the impression that there is authority being exercised by a bishop. Like, and he didn't want to give the impression of usurping a diocesan office or any kind of office. He wanted to make sure that everybody understands the bishops are strictly sacramental bishops. They are to ordain, consecrate, confirm, and so on. So that's one thing. I'm going to be looking forward to finding out who will be consecrated. And of course, how many people, right? In 1988, it was 4. And at the time, that seemed like a good number for, they were not nearly as big as they are now. So they're going to need, I don't know. Obviously, it's not going to be fewer than 4. It might be as many as 8 or perhaps even 10. I don't know. Maybe 6. Oh gosh, I lost my train of thought now.
How many bishops?
Yeah, how many bishops? And so the automatic excommunication is there as much for consecrating 1 bishop unlawfully as it is for 100 bishops unlawfully. So from their perspective, they might as well consecrate more. Get whatever 10 for the price of 1, so to speak.
Louis, what do you think? What are you looking forward to? Are you kind of the same? Kind of curious who it's going to be? Curious what Rome says?
Yeah, I hadn't really thought so much about exactly who is going to be consecrated, but that's something to look out for sure. One of the things I'm looking for is what is the back and forth going to be? This is the beginning of a negotiation, right? And that much is pretty clear. There's going to be some back and forth going on, but the society's already laid its cards on the table. We are going to consecrate new bishops on July 1st. So that's their position. That's not going to change. The date might change. Who knows? The number of persons they have in mind to consecrate, maybe they'll be willing to do some give and take on the number. Who knows? But the interesting thing to me is going to be, what's Leo going to ask for in return? He's not just going to sign off on this. I just don't see that coming. He's going to ask for something. Right. And the last time the society was in any kind of serious negotiation with the Unholy See, the ask on their part, at least one of the things that they were demanding, is that the society recognize that Vatican Council II is part of the continuing tradition of the Holy Roman Catholic Church, which is a bald-faced lie. The society knows it. Part of their position is that it's not. So they're not going to do that. So what is Leo going to ask for that he could possibly get? That's the intriguing part to me. I want to see what the ask is on the part of Leo and company.
So you think he will try to negotiate rather than just saying, nope, go ahead, you're going to be excommunicated? Because it sounds like he wants to not have trouble here. I mean, that's what I'm reading in some places. Who knows if that's true? But I mean, he seems like his personality is not really much of the one who just, wants to drag this through the mud, which is interesting. So I would be curious to see. I mean, if he does, yeah. I mean, what could he have them do? I mean, I guess there's in such a weird situation. I wonder, what could he hold over their heads even? Do you have any ideas? I can't even think.
Well, it's interesting that this is happening in the shadow of Traditionis Custodes, because clearly that agenda to anoint the Novus Ordo as the sole lex orandi of the church, the conciliar church, that's not going away. Leo's not removing that. He may extend a little grace period here and there at different places, but Traditionis Custodes and the thought process behind it, that's not going away. So it may be they're going to ask for some sort of nod to the Novus Ordo. Not that the society would give it, but that might be one of the asks, that they need to do something. Maybe they need to soften their language about the Novus Ordo. Who knows? But that's the thing that I'm going to be looking for most closely. I'm interested in seeing that.
Interesting. Mario, do you know approximately how many priests there are in the SSPX?
I think it's either 600 or 800 roughly.
Yeah, so many. Wow.
I can look it up real quick if you want me.
Yeah, that is interesting. I mean, I guess if you're, as you say, if you're picking from that many, and I suppose you're over what, five continents?
Oh yeah,
6 continents.
Right.
Yeah, I guess it would make sense to have 8 or 10. It's a big deal. I mean, it's one of those things. You especially with social media and whatnot, as you say, back in the day in 1988. I wonder how well known that was. I mean, was that a big deal, do you think, to people back in the late 80s? Did everybody know, or was it kind of you find out once you find out kind of a thing, since you didn't have the ease of social media. I mean, I don't know who wants to answer.
I'm sorry,
Louie,
what?
I don't know.
Are you asking
Do
Louie?
you think, was it a big deal, Louie, back in the day? You know, like
I couldn't tell
worldwide?
you.
I wonder about that. Yeah.
Yeah, in 1988, I was more occupied with just going to work and making money and things of that nature. I wasn't even interested in Catholicism in 1988. I had kind of wandered away from what I thought was the church as a kid that I was raised in. So I wasn't paying any attention at all. So I couldn't tell you.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, it's gonna be interesting now. I mean, it is pretty hilarious to imagine what Twitter is gonna look like from now until July. Just from the last day, it's already been a firestorm, and plenty of podcasters as well expressing their opinions as we.
Oh yes, this is going to cause a boom in podcast content for sure. I mean, look at us, right?
Yeah.
I'm thinking that this is going to be very good in so many ways. The SSPX, they're going to come out, they're going to put back in the spotlight all their arguments from 1988, and they're essentially going to be the same still, and they're still wrong. I sympathize, of course, and maybe I should maybe make that clear. Like, this is not about, look, here's the arrogant sedevacantists, and they all just so, pitying everyone else who isn't the sedevacantists. It's not about that at all. I totally sympathize with everybody else who's struggling to figure this out, and who's, been harmed by the Novus Ordo, and who's, people just throw their hands up in the air and say, like, this is driving me insane. What do I do? Where do I go to mass? Why is this happening? Is the Pope the Pope? I don't know what to do. And so on. It's very, very, it's a big struggle, but the question here isn't, do we, the question isn't people's subjective disposition. The question is, does the position make sense? Is this a Catholic position? The SSPX position, the indult position, the sedevacantist position? It's a question of which of these is true, which of these makes sense, and not who is in good faith, and don't we have basically, can't we cut people some slack? That's all. That's not what we're discussing.
Well, and I mean, just the idea, just saying, hey, we're gonna consecrate bishops whether you like it or not, Pope, right? I mean, that in itself, isn't that crazy? I mean, it's like just thinking of that. I mean, that's not Catholic. I mean,
honestly, that shows, and that just shows the genuinely schismatic nature of the whole undertaking. And again, I commiserate with the intent here is you want to keep yourself untainted from the new Vatican II religion. Wonderful. But don't deny that it's schism. It is schism with the false Pope, of course, that's clear. But it is schism. It is a refusal of submission. What they're doing is exactly what schism is. They've created their own parallel hierarchy, so to speak, or their own parallel organization that is ultimately independent of Rome. And in this moment, we're seeing that confirmed, because they may try to have good relations with Rome. They may be engaging in dialogue, and there might be an opening here or there, or where they're trying to maybe we'll make a concession here or there. But at the end of the day, they will do what they will do, what they think they need to do, regardless of what the person they recognize as the Pope says, what he forbids, and that is the nature of schism. It's like, we're ultimately not in communion with you. That's what I think is becoming manifest here. And I think it would behoove everyone just to be candid about it and not deny it. Right.
So, Mario, you mentioned, having sympathy for those persons trying to figure it all out. I mean, we're in a period of madness that's unprecedented. Mm-hmm. And, that's what we're all trying to do. That said, while I think that applies very much to the faithful of the society, I don't think it applies to the leadership of the society. I see no indication that they're trying to figure anything out. All I see is contradiction.
Correct. Yeah. And I was thinking, right. That's a whole different ball game. And mostly I'm talking about, the average Joe.
Exactly.
Right.
Let's talk to someone who's not exactly an average Joe in terms of the SSPX. We're very honored to be joined by His Excellency Bishop Pierre Roy from Canada. His Excellency has done a podcast on here. He's also recently done a podcast with Stephen Cox. I highly recommend everyone to watch that. You can find that on Cox News on YouTube. If you want more information about His Excellency, you can also find an interview with Rad Trad St. Anthony. So, Your Excellency, you spent many years as a priest in the SSPX, and you grew up as a boy as well in the SSPX. So, what are your thoughts, I guess, on this, on what now is happening? Something I imagine you probably expected must come at some point.
Yes. So good afternoon. Thank you for inviting me. So yes, well, a mixed reaction, obviously, because on one side there is a joy to see that finally, they're going to do something, and they're not going to wait until the last of their bishop has died, to consider that something must be done. On the other side, well, I understand now that there's a schismatic underlaying under all of this, because it's done with the wrong principles. What is being done is right, but it's not done in the proper way with the proper principles. So I see all of this. I was able to listen to some of what you said, and I see this very much. I agree that it's a pressure that is put on Rome on the part of the SSPX. They're trying to put pressure. To what degree is it going to work? I don't know exactly. I don't exclude completely that if they're moving in that direction, it's because they heard in the background one way or the other that their excommunication or sanction is going to be mitigated, or Rome is going to say, well, we're going to suspend the effect, the penalty for this because of the situation. But in any case, they're very much between a rock and a hard place. They have to. It had to come. It was coming. It's surprising that it didn't come under Francis, because they would have had plenty of obvious justification to do it. Now, I was saying that somebody was advocating that they're doing that now because Mary has been denied her titles as co-redemptrix and what want you. It seems absurd, there's something more. I understand that now. They had, in the last few months, they have hardened a little bit their tone. You could see that it was coming. They were preparing, so they needed to show that something was seriously wrong in Rome. But that shows you that unfortunately the private good of the institution seems to be more important in many ways than the actual doctrine of the Church. They should have been outraged during the whole pontificate of Francis, and they were not. They were not that much. But when now they have something that is important to them, well, smaller things, let's say, they're not small things, but they're smaller compared to denying the first commandment, for example, become suddenly very important.
And Your Excellency, I asked the other two, what do you think, what will come from this? Do you see good coming from this? Do you think this is going to show people kind of the issues with these, the entire idea of recognize and resist? Is it going to kind of bring to light, what the SSPX actually stands for? Do you think that some of the normal folk, in the pews are going to leave, or do you think it's going to be kind of status quo? It'll somewhat remain as it is, except for with 8 to 10 or 4 or 6, however many new bishops?
Well, I think that it's a bit of a wake-up call for the SSPX and those who follow them, but also for each one of us. And I think that's important. The best thing I've seen so far on the matter is something that has been posted this morning, I think, by Bishop Vigano. And so it seems that as soon as you mention Bishop Vigano, some people become nervous. So no, I'm not an agent of the Kremlin. I'm not anything like this. I quote Bishop Vigano because he says something interesting. So to those people, if you if you would like to be quoted instead of Bishop Vigano, well, just manage to say something that is worth quoting and we'll do it. So Archbishop Vigano posted in Italian this morning, but so here is an English translation. The Society of St. Pius X insists that it seeks not its own survival, but the good of the universal church. However, by attempting to preserve apostolic succession and refusing to draw the necessary conclusions about the nature of authority in the church today, the SSPX perpetuates an unstable ecclesiology. Bishops consecrated without a pope, operating indefinitely in a canonical vacuum, professing submission to a hierarchy that condemns their very existence. Personally, I pray that the Society will soon recognize that the absence of a true pope explains both the need and the disorder. The crisis of authority is not resolved by repeated emergency consecration, but by acknowledging the reality that the Apostolic See has been eclipsed by the modernist enemies of Christ. So I think it's a very powerful statement. Some things apply to the SSPX, and some other things apply to all of us. You know, we have to realize that there's a crisis of authority in the church today. And I hope that all of this acts as a wake-up call for all clergy. You know, I've spoken about the possibility of an imperfect general council, etc. I don't want to press this button too hard. I just want everybody to understand that we're all in a similar situation. So all of us have established camps, and we're waiting. We've taken the position of to wait, and I'm not condemning that. I'm not saying that it's wrong, etc. I'm just saying, well, it brings up a question. It brings up a question, and this question should be studied by everybody. Hopefully, it has to be done by everybody together. But there is a crisis at the head of the church today, and this question needs to be addressed not only by one's own survival, but by the church coming together and addressing this question. How is it going to take place? I don't know exactly, but I think it's an important topic. So what good is it going to come out of it? I hope this. On the other side, I think it's a big problem, because by consecrating bishops again, they're going to, obviously their plan is to continue in the same direction for another 40 years, if needed, for even more than that. And who are they going to consecrate? Well, I believe that they're going to take young people. So that's important to them. They don't want to have to do that again in 20 years or in 10 years. They're going to choose, some people think that they're going to choose, they're infiltrated, they're going to take liberal people or what want you. I think they're going to choose people who are going to follow the direction of the society no matter what. So if they turn left, the bishops are going to turn left with the society. They turn right, the bishops are going to turn right. So it's very much a mixed bag, I think, of good and less good. That's the way I see it.
Interesting. Louie, Mario, do you have any questions for His Excellency?
Not so much a question, but I'll make a comment. And Your Excellency, great to be on here with you. It's an honor. Thank you for joining us. You mentioned, the schismatic attitude of the society, and we talked about one of the questions they're going to be forced to answer here, and I'm looking forward to them being put on the spot, is excommunicated from what, if it comes to that? Right. And, social media is lit up with people charging the society with schism, because they're making this announcement, we're going to consecrate apart from papal mandate. And I would only add to that, SD Wright of the WM Review was going to join us today, couldn't, but I have to give him some credit for pointing out to me a couple weeks ago, because I was talking about schism in a different context. And he pointed me to an article that he wrote about the idea of when schism really can be in play and when it's really not, when the Pope is being resisted. And he shared with me a quote from Cogiton, which reads as follows: if someone for a reasonable motive holds the person of the Pope in suspicion and refuses his presence and even his jurisdiction, he does not commit the delict of schism. So if the society's being accused over and over of being schismatic, in a sense, they have an obligation to answer that accusation. And based on my observations, I think they're going to have to admit, if they want to have an honest conversation about schism and whether in fact they're schismatic, they're going to have to admit that in reality, they hold the person of the Pope in suspicion. But that's something that they apparently cannot admit publicly. And so therefore, I really don't believe when Father Polirani says our only one intention is that of making all souls come to the true Holy Roman Catholic Church. That's not evident in their behavior. If that really was the case, they wouldn't be training their faithful to resist the Pope, and if they were to admit, look, we hold the man in suspicion, well, then the question that needs to be answered is why? And ultimately, an honest answer is because he does not hold the Catholic faith. And this is something that they cannot do and are determined not to do. Because if they are to do that, then there's going to be a segment of their faithful who are going to look more closely at the situation and the reason why this man is questionable and why are we refusing to follow him? What is the reasonable motive? Well, it's just a couple of short steps to see this man's not Catholic. He doesn't hold the Catholic faith. He's not a member of the mystical body, much less its head on earth. And so what I see from the society up to this point is a great effort to preserve the franchise and to make sure that the SSPX franchise thrives. It's not about forming the faithful in the true Catholic faith. I don't believe for a minute that their leadership truly believes that that's the Holy Roman Catholic Church. You have to rewrite the church's ecclesiology to come to that point. And I think they're misleading their sheep, and hopefully this situation will put them on the spot where they have to answer some hard questions, perhaps in ways that they really don't want to.
Yeah, I agree. And it's very much a question of honesty. And I'll tell you just briefly something. When I left the SSPX, it all started because actually the faithful were asking questions to me after Mass. And I realized one day in my examination of conscience that I was playing a bit with the truth. And the reason I was playing with the truth is that I wanted to defend my religious congregation and my superiors. So, the spirit of party in a way. And I made a decision, I'm not going to do that anymore. So that led to saying, oh, yes, Bishop Philly said that, this or that, but I'm not in agreement. So it led to this step. And then from this step, I had no choice but to say that more and more often, and eventually to come to the conclusion that it was impossible to work under their guidance. So yes, I believe that there's a question of honesty and also a question of pride. Unfortunately, you have to remember that these people have been teaching the same thing for so many years. Some of these recognize and resist, they've started reviews, and they're at number 67 of their publishing, and so they would have to deny everything they've said from number 1 to now. So it's very hard for them to make this step. But I think they will be forced by reality. But the problem is that they're making the church suffer. The church as a whole, be in a very hard place because of their lack of willingness to embrace the truth. You mentioned suspicion. I believe that this is key. Suspicion is sufficient. Suspicion is sufficient for everybody to react. There is a high suspicion on the person of the popes, since Vatican II, and I think this is the precise point on which we could all agree that you be Novus Ordo conservative, you understand something is absolutely wrong. Accept at least that there's a suspicion that you be FSSP, that you be SSPX, sedevacantist. We could all agree on this point. The person is of the Pope today, of the quote unquote Pope, obviously, but is suspect, and the Church needs to do something about this and study that question and come to a conclusion.
Mario, any comments?
I think His Excellency already answered the question I was going to ask, more or less. First of all, nice to meet you, Your Excellency.
Nice meeting you too.
I was going to ask about, did you ever have, when you were in the SSPX, did you ever have the impression that, people at some point realize that something is wrong with their ecclesiology? Is there any soul searching? Are they ever going to start asking questions and say, gee, maybe we need to correct some errors here? Or was it like total deafness to that?
Unfortunately, when I was part of the SSPX, there weren't many theological discussions. Since I've left, I find myself discussing the crisis of the church sincerely, and the opinions of theologians, the magisterium of the church, way more than before. So it was very superficial in many places where I lived. And at seminary, there were more discussions, but I've myself witnessed a few seminarians in class who were uncomfortable with the position that was being explained by the teacher of ecclesiology. And the discussion ended up because the teacher told them, if you're not in agreement with us, you can leave. So it wasn't about
Wow.
what you're saying is interesting. Let's find the answer to that. No, it was, this is the position. And also one thing which is terrible, as much as I don't want to criticize Archbishop Lefebvre, and I know that many people hold him in very high esteem, etc. But when you make a man who is not the Pope, who is not the head of the church, above the magisterium, it creates a big problem. So very often we would see the magisterium of the church, and the conclusion of this or that topic would be, well, the Archbishop said that in our circumstances we have to do this, and this obviously you could not question. And I found myself even in a discussion with the SSPXers after my departure, where I did ask them, very clearly, if there's a disagreement between what Archbishop Lefebvre has said and what the popes of the past have said, what would you choose? And the answer was Archbishop Lefebvre. So I was very scandalized by this, but it's a reality. The cult of personality is also a problem. We must respect and what he has done, etc. But the magisterium of the church is key.
Your Excellency, what do you think? This is obviously a purely subjective question that you can't know, but what do you think Archbishop Lefebvre would have done if he were here now? Do you think he would have consecrated, another group of bishops without papal approval? I mean, do you think he'd be a sede vacantist? Again, just purely your opinion. I mean, do you think he would have changed? It's hard to say because it seems like he did kind of go back and forth.
Well, I cannot answer for him.
Sure.
But what I hope he would have done is, declare the vacancy of the see. And I think he had the position and the momentum to reunite everybody together and, discuss this question in depth and come to some conclusions. I said that with Stephen Cox, but I think that, they have 700 priests now. I think in 1988, they had probably a couple hundred priests at the time. So 40 years later, there's 700 priests. So that's not much more than 200, yes, it is more, but what is it compared to the size of the Novus Ordo? And Rome doesn't fear, you could have twice that number in 40 years when we meet again for the third row of episcopal consecration of the SSPX. They would, Rome would be still indifferent. That's not what they fear. What they fear is everybody, recognizing that they have no authority and starting to act against it.
Do you think, Your Excellency, that they fear Rome, that is, and Leo? Do you think that they fear or have more of a problem with the SSPX or say the FSSP or someone who, some of the indult groups? I mean, because the SSPX really is such a strange thorn, but I guess which one do you think is more of a problem for them?
I don't think the Rome fears anybody right now. Rome will fear us when we come together, all of us, and start to doing the right things. So I don't think they fear us. They know that we non unacum, sede vacantist, are splitting as we grow. The SSPX, they have them in the bag already to a degree because they recognize their authority. So, this meeting that happened in 2009, I was at the seminary. There were discussions with Rome. It was very important. And some of the teachers in Econ were part of these discussions. Two teachers were part of the discussions. We were told that we would get, it was all secret, but we would get the content of the discussions afterwards. So we never heard anything. But it seems that from what we heard, in the background, it seems that it was the same argument as the argument of Traditionis Custodes, which left the SSPX with no answer, because the ecclesiology is very clear. If it's the living magisterium, which is our guide, we can go dig into Holy Scripture, as Protestants would do. We can become, in a way, our own version of Protestantism by thinking that the interpretation of the past magisterium is left to each person individually. It's the living magisterium of the church which has authority to interpret all of this. So they were left in a hard position because they were recognizing these people as being the living magisterium of the church, and that's the heart of the problem. As long as you recognize Leo as being the guardian of tradition and the living magisterium of the church, you have to join him. You will never be able to find arguments to be separated from him and take a different path than the path he wants you to take.
Louie,
Kevin, if I could, I fully agree with you, Your Excellency, that Rome apparently fears next to no one, at least no one who represents or is attempting to speak in defense of the true faith. No fear at all. If Rome fears anybody, and I don't want to take us down a whole different path because this is a subject for another podcast, but if they fear anybody, it's the Jews. Because no other group has the ability to hold Conciliar Rome's feet to the fire.
That's right.
Bergoglio preached something that actually sounded Catholic a few years ago. He talked about how the old law doesn't save, that it can't. Immediately letters were fired off by Jewish leaders in a retraction game. That's the only fear that Rome knows. The only other thing I would add is I kind of expect to see between now and July, as this thing plays out, and it'll play out in a certain public way, that there will be statements from the SSPX quoting Archbishop Lefebvre in support of what they're doing. And even though none of us can say, and it's absolutely true, we don't know what the Archbishop would do if he were alive today, but I think it's a grave insult to his memory to suggest that he could have lived through the Bergoglian reign of terror and still said that man is the Holy Roman Pontiff. I think that's a terrible insult. So it's one thing to say, yes, we don't know exactly what he would do, but the society seems to speak as if they know. Oh, absolutely, he'd hold the position we hold. And I think that's an insult to his memory.
May I add something to what you've said? I think that they fear two things, actually. They fear the Jews, as you said. I very much agree with that. And the second thing, I think they fear a true pope.
Yes, agree.
Amen to that. Well, Your Excellency, I know you don't have too much time to stay with us today. I do want to share your website for anyone who can support His Excellency. Please do. He has a lot going on up there in northeastern Canada, www.latinmassmaritimes.org. You can find out all about what His Excellency is doing. And of course, please support him and his many good works up there as well. And again, I cannot recommend enough going over and watching the show that he did recently with Stephen Cox. I'll try to remember to put that in the comment section. I'll probably forget, so someone remind me. I know you're out there, ladies. There's one lady who always reminds me to add the links, so I appreciate that. I'll try to remember to do that. It's a very good show and very, very interesting, very thought-provoking, and I highly recommend everyone to check that out. Your Excellency, before you go, do you have any last words, any last thoughts? Again, there's a lot to wait for, I suppose, before July. A lot to be excited about, I suppose. You know, seeing who they're going to pick and whatnot is kind of a for podcasters and bloggers out there. It makes for interesting fodder. But do you have any last words before you leave us?
No, I would just like to finish with words of charity, because I believe that we are discussing the SSPX right now, but our situation is not so different from theirs. You know, we've reached the true conclusions. I'm convinced of that. But you know, they're not heretics and declared schismatics, etc. So we're all in this turmoil together. I think it's very important to pray for each other, to keep charity. And, you know, charity, as St. Paul says, vanquish everything, so overcomes everything. So these divisions will have to be overcome by a true charity and coming together in the Holy Ghost. So that's what will be my prayer for them and for ourselves as well. Thank you for having me, and God bless you.
Thank you,
Thank
Excellency.
you.
Hopefully we
Thank
can do
you.
it again
Thank
soon
you.
sometime. God bless you. Well, Louie, Mario, we got maybe 5 more minutes here if you want to wrap it up, or I mean, we could do longer than that as well. I don't know if there's anything we've missed, anything you guys want to continue to harp on. Louie, look, you look like you have something you could say.
Well, no, not necessarily. I mean, I think just the one thing that's come up a few different times is the faulty ecclesiology of the society. And that's, you know, something they have to answer for. You know, who is the church? Well, according to the society, the church can teach dangerous error and can lead souls to hell. And the preaching of the Pope, the proximate rule of faith, it's not always safe, despite the fact that the church's ecclesiology for nearly 2,000 years said it is. And I was looking at just some brief quotes about what is the church with regard to being the rule of faith. And Van Noort kind of summed it up very succinctly. He said that the rule of faith, with the Pope being the proximate rule of faith, the preaching of the church, which is primarily the preaching of the Pope and that of the bishops in union with him, he explained it as such that it is, quote, an easy rule, one that can be observed by all alike, even the uneducated. Okay, that is the antithesis of the stuff coming out of Rome. Look at Amoris Laetitia. I mean, I can't remember how many words that thing was, but thousands upon thousands of words were spilled trying to explain it because it's not an easy rule. Secondly, he said it's, quote, it's a safe rule where the church's teaching office is infallible in safeguarding and presenting Christ's doctrine. It's the last thing that you can say about what's going out of Rome now. And lastly, he says it explains the meaning of doctrines and puts an end to controversies. Well, according to the society, the preaching of the church, such as it's been disseminated for the past 60 years, the preaching of the man that they claim to be the Pope in particular, even according to them, it's not an easy rule. And far from putting an end to controversies, it creates them left and right. What's more, it's not safe. It's not infallible. It doesn't pass on the true faith in any way, shape, or form, and it's downright dangerous. So I think hopefully observers are going to be watching this unfold, and they'll have to ask themselves, is the church, as understood by the society, is that my church? Is that the church that I belong to? I think if the faithful just took a step back and asked themselves that question, I'm talking about the faithful of the society. Do I belong to a church that endangers my soul? Do I follow a pope who might lead me to hell? The answer has to be no. And if that's what your understanding of the Catholic Church is, you never knew her. So this is kind of an exciting time, and I'm glad to see this thing unfolding. It's going to be very interesting.
Mario, any thoughts? Last words?
Yeah, well, I kind of thought we were just getting started.
Oh, no, then get started. Then get started. I know how you can go, Mario.
I would like to. I thought it would probably be a good idea, just in the interests of making sure we're all getting our doctrine from the Catholic Magisterium, the pre-Vatican II Magisterium. There's a lot, that's out there in papal encyclicals that is, and also, of course, from the theology books before Vatican II, that is very pertinent here. And I think a number of things a lot of people are not aware of because it's just they've never been shown, they've never seen, they've never come across that evidence. And so I know, so I used to be a subscriber, if you will, to the SSPX's theological position. I used to defend them. I used to be convinced that their position was true. until I found evidence upon evidence that the Catholic Church, like the actual traditional Catholic pre-Vatican II teachings and principles, do not jibe with that at all. And one question that you will that will always come up from both sides, like, so the Novus Ordo side will accuse the SSPX of schism, and the SSPXers will always say, well, that's a totally ridiculous accusation. Okay. And the question is not whether or not there is a declaration by this or that cardinal or this or that supposed pope. Ultimately, the question is, does the Society of St. Pius X meet the criteria for schism, like doctrinally? Okay, when we look at what is schism, what are the characteristics of schism, does the SSPX check those boxes or not? Because if they do, then schism would be the correct label to use here. And it's not a question of, well, who said they are in schism? It's a question of what is schism, and does the SSPX fit that definition? And here we can go to a very, very unbiased source on the subject, a book from 1948. It was written by Father Ignatius Zal, and it's S-Z-A-L, and it is called The Communication of Catholics with Schismatics. Okay, and of course, communication here, he's talking about religious communication, right? Communication in sacred things, communicatio in sacris, as far, sacraments, worship, in other words, not profane things. We're not talking about whatever, can you buy a gallon of milk from someone who is Eastern Orthodox? So that's obviously not the question. So in this book, and you can borrow it digitally on archive.org, The Communication of Catholics with Schismatics, obviously, in the very beginning, the question comes up, well, what is schism, right? So that first has to be clarified. And it's very interesting because Father Zal lays out four criteria that define what schism is. Okay, schism, we're talking about the canonical delict of schism. Like, strictly speaking, here is what schism is. And I'd like to quote that because it is very instructive. And again, this is totally unbiased. This was written in 1948. There was no SSPX. There was no Novus Ordo Church. There was no, Novus Ordo Pope or whatever. So Father Zal writes the following, and this is on page 2, like I said, in the very beginning. And he writes, quote, "To constitute the delict of schism in the strict sense, the following conditions are required. Number 1, one must withdraw directly or expressly or indirectly by means of one's actions from obedience to the Roman Pontiff and separate oneself from ecclesiastical communion with the rest of the faithful, even though one does not join a separate schismatical sect." Okay. Number 2, one's withdrawal must be made with obstinacy and rebellion. Number 3, the withdrawal must be made in relation to those things by which the unity of the church is constituted. And number 4, this is critical, despite this formal disobedience, the schismatic must recognize the Roman Pontiff as the true pastor of the church, and he must profess as an article of faith that obedience is due the Roman Pontiff, unquote. That is super critical because very often people will SSPXers will say, how could we possibly be schismatic? See, right here, we have this picture of the Pope in our sacristy, in our churches. We pray for the Pope. We mention the Pope in the canon of the Mass. What do you mean schismatic? Well, none of that means you're not schismatic. in fact, if anything, it shows you recognize this man as the true Roman pontiff, and you're refusing him submission anyway. And Pius IX, in a situation where there was a schism with the Armenian church, he said that makes it even worse in a sense. And I can quote that as well later on, if you like. But so the reason why it is so crucial, as Father Zal says, that the schismatic must profess as an article of faith that obedience is due the Roman pontiff, is that if you don't do that, then we're not just talking about schism, but also heresy, since that is a dogma. So if we're talking about schism itself, not schism mixed with heresy, but just schism, it includes the profession of the true faith by the schismatic. And as part of that, he professes, yes, submission to the Roman pontiff is required. Okay? He just doesn't actually render that submission, but he does profess that it is required. So whenever we hear that, oh, but the SSPX, they agree you must, whatever, normally obey the Pope or whatever, they teach all these things. That does not absolve them of the charge of schism. And so let's take a quick look and see if those 4 conditions that I just mentioned, or that I just quoted from Father Zal, if the SSPX meets those criteria. And again, we're going to approach this from the perspective of the SSPX, because we want to see if from within their own world, their position makes sense and is consistent with Catholic principles. They believe Leo XIV and all the other Vatican II was that they're true popes. So we've got to keep that in mind. And they believe that the Vatican II Church is the Catholic Church. So condition number 1, one must withdraw either directly or indirectly, right? Either in words or by actions from obedience to the Roman pontiff and separate oneself from ecclesiastical communion with the rest of the faithful. Well, that the SSPX refuses obedience and or submission is clear in the sense that they continually judge his teachings. I don't know if they still bother much with his canonizations, but whatever comes out of Rome is essentially subject to review by the SSPX, and then whatever the SSPX decides about it, that's what the rest of the SSPX accepts, pretty much.
Well, then
Okay.
they don't need his approval for consecrations of bishops, right? So
well, that's just it, right?
Yeah.
They'll say, yeah, we'll try to work with him, but if he doesn't do it, if he doesn't give us the permission, then we'll do it anyway.
But he's a bad dad, Mario.
He's a bad dad. There you go. So they are indeed withdrawing from obedience to the person they recognize as the Roman pontiff. Okay. Then secondly, the withdrawal must be made with obstinacy and rebellion. Well, they'll say, well, no, we're not really rebellious, but we're not, obstinate. But yes, absolutely you are, because you're deliberately and intentionally rebelling against the Novus Ordo Pope's magisterium and their laws and their liturgical rites and so on. I mean, they tell you, no, you can't do that. You ignore their judgment, right? Archbishop Lefebvre was suspended. He kept doing his thing anyway, and so on. It is very much obstinacy and rebellion. Now, that they all mean to be faithful to the, pre-Vatican II magisterium, okay, fine, but that's, if Leo is the Pope, then that's not good enough. It has to be to the magisterium here and now, today. Then number 3, the withdrawal must be made in relation to those things by which the unity of the church is constituted. Well, what constitutes the unity of the church? As far as I know, it is the unity in faith, government, and worship. Okay, and there's exactly those 3 things by which from which the SSPX withdraws in the Novus Ordo Church, right? They have nothing to do with the Novus Ordo teachings, right? They're definitely withdrawing their assent, their submission from that. Government, well, at least, who knows what their position is now, but 20, 25 years ago, certainly they were rejecting parts of the new code of canon law. And, the whole new code of canon law is ecumenicized, and it's Vatican II made into law, basically. And so it's clear that they are withdrawing from that. They're not allowing themselves to be governed by that, at least not unless they agree with it first. And number three, well, worship, obviously. Okay. They're not using any of the Novus Ordo liturgical rites, even though they were made mandatory. Yes, they were. So that's clear. So far, the SSPX has checked 3 out of the 4 boxes for schism, right? And now number 4, well, let's remember what that was. Despite this formal disobedience, the schismatic must recognize the Roman pontiff as the true pastor of the church, and he must profess as an article of faith that obedience is due the Roman pontiff. Bingo, right? They're saying, yes, Leo XIV is the true and legitimate pastor of the church. And when we see him, we greet him. This is basically what Bishop Fillet said in an interview that was never publicized by the SSPX. This was the conflict zone interview. I don't want to get into that now, but he was basically saying, oh yeah, no, when we see the Pope, we greet him, we're very nice to him. And then, well, that's not what is meant by submission to the Roman pontiff, and they do profess as an article of faith that obedience or submission is due the Roman pontiff. And if they don't do that, well, then they're guilty of heresy. So yeah, I think we have a really good case that based on the definition given by Father Ignatius Zoll in 1948, that would seem to fit, right? The definition of schism, the SSPX checks all those boxes.
And so either they're schismatic with a false church, or that's the issue, right? There's no real good position for them.
So what I'm saying is, right now, of course, Leo is not the Pope, and it's the nobles. That's all garbage. But from within the SSPX position, like it doesn't make any sense. They can't say, well, we're defending the true faith. And then you look at, okay, well, what does the true faith, the pre-Vatican II faith, what does it say about schism? And they're like, well, okay, but okay, well, we're not saying that's correct. Or you can't do it. It's an impossibility, right? And this whole idea that essentially, look, what they're ultimately saying is that the Holy See has gone astray, has defected, and the SSPX, through Archbishop Lefebvre's work, is now is required to basically to back up Rome, to be the substitute Holy See for the time being, until the Holy See is once again has come to its senses and everything is back to normal. Okay, that position is utterly incompatible, of course, with the pre-Vatican II Catholic faith. Right? Because the Holy See cannot defect. That very scenario is exactly ruled out again and again in the papal teaching. And it doesn't make any sense. Like, why would you have to, if you can refuse submission to the Roman pontiff, and then maybe even say, well, he's not always infallible, and then at the same time you somehow have this absolute allegiance to Archbishop Lefebvre, whom God never appointed Archbishop Lefebvre. God did found the office of the papacy and gave special privileges and protections to the papal office. God never gave that to Archbishop Lefebvre. So, the SSPX position from within its own world, clearly, as far as I can tell, is the textbook definition of schism.
I think it's absolutely true.
Right.
At number 4, obviously, as you intimated, it's where the rubber hits the road. That's the big one. And the only out that the society has in order to claim that they're not schismatic is to say, we do not recognize that man as Pope. That's not going to happen. But then they have this somewhat half step, according to this quote that I offered from Cogiton. They have to admit that they hold the person of the Pope in suspicion. And then that opens the floodgates to more questions. Well, why? And then once you start to explain that, you end up essentially admitting the man's not a Catholic. So they're in a rock and a hard place, and they're going to be inundated with accusations of schism, as they should, because, like you said, Mario, they tick all 4 boxes. So that'll be interesting to see how they answer, but they're dishonest. So I honestly don't expect them to give a Catholic answer to those accusations. Why should they? So far, so good. They've been teaching their faithful for all these years that you can defy the Pope and that the church could lead you to hell if you're not careful. So if you're willing to say that much, or at least lead your faithful to believe it, why would they give a Catholic answer to this?
Yeah, the irony is, of course, that, okay, well, wait a minute. Well, then who guarantees that the SSPX isn't going to lead us astray? Well, nobody.
Right, no one. It's just another.
Right. And it is so insane that on the one hand, they're saying that you can disobey and refuse submission to the Pope, even to the point of excommunication, but don't you dare say anything against Archbishop Lefebvre. Don't you dare cross the superior general. Okay. I mean, Bishop Williamson, if I remember correctly, what was it, 2012 or so? He was, again, if my memory is right, he was kicked out for disobedience. I mean, does it get any more ironic than that? The whole SSPX is founded on, well, maybe not founded on disobedience, because they did have approval, but ultimately the SSPX can only exist because of disobedience. And that disobedience is punished with excommunication. Well, how then can you turn around and say, well, excuse me, you're not obeying the superior general? You would say, okay, and who appointed you superior general? Well, it wasn't the Pope, that's for sure. So the SSPX position is an absolute mess.
It's a train wreck.
It's a nightmare. It's a train wreck.
Becoming more obvious. I think, and I don't mean to insult, again, the people that are the faithful of the society. I think they're, they became a little bit tribal, a lot of them, but most of them are really, they're people that want to sincerely be and remain Catholic.
Of course. I was in good faith when I was with the SSPX.
At this point, though, and with the holding up of Archbishop Lefebvre as this untouchable figure whose comments, even if they're 25 years old and discount entirely the experience of the past several decades, I mean, there's a cult-like quality to that. And I don't say that to cast shade on innocent people that are members of the society and they go to their chapels and they just want to be Catholic and they have a childlike trusting attitude in their superiors, which that's a good Catholic attitude to have, even though they don't have that attitude towards the man they call the Pope. They do have it towards their pastors, but there's a cult-like quality to this society. It's hard not to recognize that. And I'm sure that'll upset people that I said it out loud, but it's true.
Yeah, I think calling them Lefebvrists is oftentimes the appropriate term, and I know that
and they hate it.
Yeah, they do. Bishop Waugh, he mentioned, I think the podcast with me, maybe with Stephen, but anyway, I think he mentioned too that a lot of it you're not allowed to challenge it. You're not allowed to really think for yourself, and if you do, just boom, shut down. It's not allowed to happen. I mean, I mentioned before how I have a friend who he wanted to marry a girl from the SSPX. So he's a Sede Vacantist, wanted to marry this girl, and he wanted to convince her to become a Sede Vacantist. And in that whole story, he went with her to her SSPX priest to ask some of the questions and kind of go one-on-one. And apparently this priest, like he sat there and he listened to all the objections my friend had. And in the end, he was just kind of like, yeah, those are good points. I don't really know. That was it. It was just like, that was kind of like, I don't really know. I'm not, it's not what I'm paid for. It's above my pay grade. And it's kind of like, boof, that's,
yeah.
Well, on the topic of Archbishop Lefebvre, I should say, just to be clear, I'm very sympathetic toward him in the sense that he was very close to the fire. And we're sitting here all these years later with a perspective that he didn't have. And he was doing his best to try to make sense of this unbelievable situation. And one of the ways that he attempted to make sense of it was kind of a dual hierarchy theory, where he theorized that the man claiming to be Pope is head of this conciliar church, which is not the Catholic Church. He plainly said that. But to the extent that he upholds the true faith, he's the Pope of the Catholic Church, which again, God bless him for trying to sort it out and make sense of a crazy situation, but that makes absolutely no sense, obviously. The fake Archbishop of Canterbury of the Anglican Church can't be the head of that organization and also at the one and the same time the head of the Holy Roman Catholic Church. The dual hierarchy thing is just total nonsense.
Well, and I think ironically it sounds a lot like Vatican II, doesn't it? We've got these elements over here, and to the to the degree that whatever he does the right thing, then it's this, and to the degree that he does the other thing, it's that, and it's like, no, you can't divide it. You can't divide it into elements and then have, oh, look, faithful elements here and unfaithful elements there. It's like partial communion.
Sure, that's exactly my take on that dual hierarchy thing. It's the partial communion thing.
Yeah. Kevin, I don't know if we want to. If I just sent you a link that you may want to pull up on the screen. This is a post that I published in 2022. It's called Pope Pius IX Syllabus of Lefebvrist Errors. Okay. And of course, it's a little bit tongue-in-cheek, obviously. Obviously, Archbishop Lefebvre wasn't alive yet in 1873. And but these are errors that were condemned in one way or another by Pope Pius IX, and they bear striking resemblance to the SSPX position of today. And a lot of people don't know about that. The main text here, not the only text, but the main text is Pope Pius IX's encyclical published on January 6th, 1873, called Quartus Supra. Okay. And I'd like to quote some from that. I'm gonna go fast, and this is not, I'm just taking bits and pieces here and there. But you will, I think, agree that this all sounds very familiar. Okay. You got it. Wonderful. If I go a little down a little further, and it starts there, and I'm not going to read the whole thing, but let me just pick some bits and pieces. So Pius IX says, and again, ask yourself, have I heard this before recently? Does this sound like what I've read from the SSPX? He says, quote, "The chief deceit used to conceal the new schism is the name of Catholic. The originators and adherents of the schism presumptuously lay claim to this name despite their condemnation by our authority and judgment. It has always been the custom of heretics and schismatics to call themselves Catholics and to proclaim their many excellences in order to lead peoples and princes into error. But to prove that they are Catholics, the neo-schismatics appeal to what they call a declaration of faith, which they insist disagrees in no regard with the Catholic faith. However, it has never been possible to prove oneself a Catholic by affirming those statements of the faith which one accepts and keeping silence on those doctrines which one decides not to profess." Let's see. They rejected the declaration or profession of faith which was proposed to them on our authority. For any man to be able to prove his Catholic faith and affirm that he is truly a Catholic, he must be able to convince the Apostolic See of this. Whoever the Roman pontiff judges to be a schismatic for not expressly admitting and reverencing his power must stop calling himself Catholic. And now here it goes into what sounds very much like the SSPX. They argue that the sentence of schism and excommunication pronounced against them by the Archbishop of Tyana, the apostolic delegate in Constantinople, was unjust and consequently void of strength and influence. They have claimed also that they are unable to accept the sentence because the faithful might desert to the heretics if deprived of their ministration. A little bit later, this see possesses the right of judging the whole church, and no one may judge its judgment. The Jansenist heretics dare to teach such doctrines as that an excommunication pronounced by a lawful prelate could be ignored on a pretext of injustice. Each person should perform, as they said, his own particular duty despite an excommunication. And a little bit later, but if one should be afraid, so then he goes into Pope Clement XI, how in his bull condemning Quesnel, one of the Jansenists, the Constitution Unigenitus of Clement XI, in there are statements. I believe I have them. Let me see if I have them on this page here. I guess not. In any case, let me see. I'm sorry. I just think they're so important that I should quote them. Oops. Give me 1 second, please. Here we go. And you can find this in Denzinger, numbers 1441 and 1442. From Pope Clement XI in 1713. So the following statements are condemned errors, okay? They're wrong, they cannot be held. Number 1, the fear of an unjust excommunication should never hinder us from fulfilling our duty. Never are we separated from the church, even when by the wickedness of men we seem to be expelled from it, as long as we are attached to God, to Jesus Christ, and to the church herself by charity. Again, that's condemned. And the other error is to suffer in peace an excommunication and an unjust anathema rather than betray truth is to imitate St. Paul. Far be it from rebelling against authority or of destroying unity. Again, condemned. I mean, this sounds almost like textbook SSPX. And to go back to Quartus Supra, the Catholic, this is Pius IX. The Catholic Church has always regarded as schismatic those who obstinately oppose the lawful prelates of the Church, and in particular the chief shepherd of all. Schismatics avoid carrying out their orders and even deny their very rank. They are schismatics. Oh, this is interesting. They are schismatics even if they had not yet been condemned as such by apostolic authority. In other words, you don't need to wait for a declaration from Rome to tell you that you are schismatic if you fulfill the conditions for schism. And then the Pope says, every schism fabricates a heresy for itself to justify its withdrawal from the Church. But the neo-schismatics declare that they do not oppose the Catholic Church's principles in the least. So, again, so Pius IX is essentially saying, he's talking about the, I believe it was the Armenian church who had gone into schism, and he's just using all their arguments and showing them to be false, to be condemned, to be he's refuting all of their arguments. And if you read it in detail, you'll see a lot that sounds a lot condemned, that sounds a lot like the SSPX. And he says in a document issued in this encyclical Quae in Patriarchatu of September 1st, 1876, and that's also on this page a little bit further down. What good is it to proclaim aloud the dogma of the supremacy of St. Peter and his successors? What good is it to repeat over and over declarations of faith in the Catholic Church and of obedience to the Apostolic See when actions give the lie to these fine words? Moreover, is not rebellion rendered all the more inexcusable by the fact that obedience is recognized as a duty? Again, does not the authority of the Holy See extend as a sanction to the measures which we have been obliged to take, or is it enough to be in communion of faith with the See without adding the submission of obedience, a thing which cannot be maintained without damaging the Catholic faith? In fact, venerable brethren, beloved sons, it is a question of recognizing the power of the See even over your churches, not merely in what pertains to faith, but also in what concerns discipline. He who would deny this is a heretic. He who recognizes this and obstinately refuses to obey is worthy of anathema, unquote. And I think now I'll let you, Kevin, or Louie speak.
That was
Louie?
great. I mean, there's so many things from the Preconciliar Magisterium that when you read them today, in hindsight, it almost looks like the popes could see what's going on today and are directly condemning it. I can't even remember exactly what the document was, but I made that comment. It's as though the Holy Father from 70, 80 years ago had read De Verbum of Vatican II and started condemning its errors. You know, it's an amazing thing. And the beautiful thing about divine providence is that this madness didn't happen, and God did not allow it to happen until we got into this period of time where, look, technology can be used for evil, but it gives people like us access to the traditional magisterium in a way to help us make sense of this crisis that's going
For
on
sure.
within your
Yeah,
church.
absolutely.
Imagine if this happened 100 years ago, 150 years ago, where the only way you could learn the kinds of things that we're talking about, you'd have to go to your library and hope that you could get a book that would help you. And it would be a much more challenging situation for those who wanted to remain faithful.
All right.
So the last
Yeah.
comment I would make about this situation is just to speak directly to the faithful of the society. And when I said just a moment ago that the society appears to give off some cult-like qualities, and the reason why I say that is because the faithful, what they've actually thought through it or not, the mindset of my understanding and my experience of the typical Society of St. Pius X faithful is that they've become very comfortable questioning the man that they call the Pope, questioning the Roman congregations that work at his pleasure to teach the faith along with him. But they are very, very uncomfortable questioning their direct pastors. And that's a problem. And if any of them, they got to be troubled by what's going on. Just my plea to you would be to take a small step back and just educate yourself, independent of your pastors, on the traditional ecclesiology of the church. Forget about even digging into the papacy. These things are so closely related, you'll get there. But just ask your question, who is Holy Mother Church? Can I trust her never to teach me the poisonous food of error? Yes or no? Because the Preconciliar Magisterium is super clear about that the teachings of the church, the authoritative teachings, just extends beyond dogmatic definitions and infallible proclamations. It's always safe. It will never lead your soul to hell. Just get to the bottom of that and you'll free yourself from so much confusion. And that's what I hope comes out of this mess moving forward.
Yeah, they can ask themselves, do I, when the Pope, whom they believe to be the Pope, when the Pope issues a teaching document, do I approach this with, yes, I want to be instructed by this, I'm going to imbibe this, I'm going to receive this instruction? Or is it more like, oh my goodness, what are they saying now? No, I don't believe this. No, I forget that. That's garbage. And, which is exactly how it is, right? Rome releases something and then everybody judges the document.
Sure. And the only answer to that is it's not coming out of a Catholic. It's not,
yes,
I would no more, turn on the 700 Club on my cable TV feed and take that to heart than I would the stuff coming out of Rome. Yeah. But I don't call the people in Rome Catholic, so I'm okay with that. But it's such a terrible contradiction to call Rome the church and behave that way. But
yeah. I mean, if we want to uphold the true faith, we need to make every effort to understand what that true faith is. And I know some people get frustrated and say, "Oh, why aren't you just you're shooting at other traditionalists? Why you're doing this? Shouldn't we be fighting the modernists?" Like, well, look, there's the Catholic faith, and then there's error and heresy, and it doesn't matter from what side that error or heresy comes. The SSPX is ultimately represents a false traditionalism. And we need to understand that we're never going to fix, or we're endangering our own souls if we take such an attitude towards the truth that we're just saying, well, okay, I mean, as long as we're all just trying to do our best, it doesn't matter. No, it does matter, for sure.
Well, and I mean, if you can become, kind of part of this cult of personality, right? I mean, what's to stop another, let's say, one of these new bishops who comes along and does his own thing and keeps it so, it's just like, what's the point? If you keep going away, if you're away from the church, then you cannot be the church. If you're a Lefebvrist, you're not, can you be fully Catholic? It just seems, I don't know, it should be something really simple, but I suppose it's easy to get caught up in what they do have traditionally. And it is obviously confusing times, but yeah.
You can't, the bottom line is you cannot be Catholic in the Vatican II church. Okay. It's impossible. Yeah. It'd be like squaring the circle.
And the frustrating thing is that much is totally obvious to the people in the society, including its leadership. I mean, that's part of their stock and trade, is to be imparting to their faithful that they cannot follow the Vatican II Church. They cannot follow the teachings of the Council and remain Catholic.
Yeah.
They know it.
Yes.
Very
Right.
frustrating.
Yeah, exactly. So the only way out of that is to recognize it's a false religion. It's a false church. It's a false pope. Yes, there are a bunch of other questions that arise from that, and we don't always have a perfectly good answer, but that's a separate subject. We're not going to fix that by just saying, okay, let's just be SSPX then. And look at, if you look at everything that has happened since 1958 when Pope Pius XII died, and then John the 23rd took over, and then Vatican II and all that, it's never been worse than today, or at least it has steadily progressed and gotten worse and worse and worse. Okay. Now they're into synodalism or synodality that's keeping them busy. And they're, this fraternity stuff and human dignity and whatever, all this stuff is getting worse and worse and worse. It's not going back to pre-Vatican II. And even if it did, it wouldn't solve anything, because you'd still have a defected church, right? Like it's an impossible scenario. So this idea that, oh, well, one day it'll be a true pope. I'm sorry, I'm criticizing the recognize and resist position, right? One day the pope will be back to his senses and then all be normal again. Okay, but what happened in the meantime, in these 60, 70 years? Can the church defect for a little bit as long as she comes back? But bad for you if you happen to live through those 70 years, right?
Right, and that's exactly the implication. Or Leo will convert,
Yeah,
become Catholic, and therefore he will have the power of
Yeah.
the papacy to exercise.
Yeah,
But the church was,
But then why? Okay, let's say there's a Leo the 15th, right? And he is St. Pius X reincarnated, basically, right? Well, why are his decrees all of a sudden valid and binding and everything, right?
Well, the faithful of the people who are following the recognize and resist leaders, including in the society, they're going to be in a position where they're going to be looking at this guy and saying, do I really have to accept that? No, I can question it, because for more than a generation now, they've been training these people to question what's coming out of the Pope.
Yes, hey, I got good news though, guys. For just $19.99 a month, you can get all of the answers over at Pelican Bus. I got to do it every show now.
I think it's $15.99.
Was it $15.99?
Yeah,
they keep going down in price.
$15.99.
I'm pretty sure they started $25.99, but I guess that they're giving some good discounts these days. And I always give them. I give them free marketing. You're welcome. You're welcome, guys. Anyway, sorry.
Well, fellas, I'm about to expire.
Oh, okay.
I'm not going to pass away here on the
That's
air.
good.
Wait, I still had a thought.
Mario had a thought. This is dangerous.
Yeah,
Mario. Well, Mario, when you think of your thought, then let's do another show, because I'm sure there'll be plenty to talk about as always, in the next few months. And as always, it was a pleasure with you guys. I mean, let's certainly do this again. You guys, you're always welcome. I always appreciate the conversations. Always learn a lot. And it's good, again, to have some clear voices in these difficult times. Again, trying, as the good bishop told us, to be charitable in these times, but also, clear in our convictions. And again, cannot recommend enough both of the websites from these two gentlemen, aka Catholic.com. And I'm trying to find it here. There it is, aka Catholic.com, and at Novus Ordo Watch.
I remember what I was going to say. It's just a quick thought.
Quick, Mario. Go ahead.
Imagine if this Leo the 15th then issued a decree forbidding the Novus Ordo Mass. Well, guess what? All those attached to the Novus Ordo, they can quote Benedict XVI, where he says, well, sorry, but what earlier generations held as sacred is still sacred to us today. So guess what? Your Novus Ordo is now traditional, can't be forbidden.
Yeah. And there's definitely going to be people who are going to light torches and run on the local chancery.
Well, and in a sense, they would be right. Like, wait a minute, you can't. What do you mean? It's well, yes, you could forbid it now and say, okay, we're no longer using that, but you can't say it was all evil or whatever. Like, you couldn't condemn it doctrinally, right? You could say we're no longer using this right, and therefore it's forbidden, but you can't say it was heretical or evil or unsafe, harmful, whatever. Couldn't condemn it in that sense.
Very true.
Endless issues. Well,
Yeah.
Louie, Mario, as always, again, it's been a pleasure. Everyone in the chat's been
Thank you, everyone.
certainly a busy chat. Some disagreements, which I think is it's a good thing. I think it's nice to get a little bit of disagreement, a little bit of controversy over there. Get some interesting discussions in the live chat. Everyone who is watching this not live, please remember to comment, like, share, all that stuff. There was a lot of good information here, so if you enjoyed it, please share it with your family and friends. And again, akacatholic.com, novusordowatch.org, and you can check out, again, His Excellency's website at latinmassmaritimes.org. If you want to watch more from our channel, or if you like what you watched, you can support us over on Patreon. Just go to Patreon and then search Catholic Family Podcast. We will be taking a break during Lent, which is coming up way too quickly. But before then, we will have plenty of other shows. I'll be doing a live show on February the 13th with two sisters, two nuns of the Congregation of the Mother of God, which will be very nice. You can ask them your questions. If you have any questions, what it means to be a nun, and what is the daily life like, then you can join that live stream on February 13th at 2 p.m. Eastern time. And until then, God bless you all. Mario, Louie, thank you again.